Hey, this is State of Wake with Dimitri and Paul. And this episode is a special report, our inaugural episode, whatever the heck we're going to call them. This is all about true racism, true America, the real racism, not the fake racism. So without further ado, let's kick this show off. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go.
State of Wake with Dimitri and Paul.
You're either with us or you're with the enemy. That's clear. I will continue to make that clear.
Basically, taking over and the government running all of your companies.
We're scared. We're scared of the presidency. I have to tell you, he is a decent person and a person that did not have to be scared as president of the United States.
I have two words for you. You will never see it coming.
Pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Either you're with us, either you love freedom, and with nations which embrace freedom, or you're with the enemy.
Make part of every day some kind of anti-violence, anti-gun message. Every day, every school, and every level. You do this every day of the week, and just brainwash them thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
And when they say, I want my lawyer, you tell them, shut up. Good time to pick your lawyer. You're an enemy from that.
We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents, or kids belong to their families, and recognize that kids belong to whole communities.
State of Wake with Dimitri and Paul. What's your state of Wake?
Well, what is your state of wake, Dimitri? I like to yell. Yeah, you are. I don't know how awake I am, but everybody is sick of mine. We all have that. I don't know if I'm getting it. I don't know. It's like wavering. Not sick. You know, it's like I'm in tweener state between healthy and sick.
Have you had
I'm a tweener right now.
explosive, like lava, projecting out of your body from either end?
Either end, no. I am not explosive lava. No. But I'm feeling like febrile, woozy. I'm seeing things. But this is usually how I get when I see you face to face. Febrile. Febrile.
With an F.
Febrile. Yes, it means to be fever-like. It's very sophisticated. Dimitri is new to this country. He's only been here. How long have you been here? Yeah, brand new. New spanking.
Are you coming after an immigrant?
Dude, I've been here since the 60s, okay? Since the freaking 60s. I am here since the 60s, so I think that generally speaking, I have seniority over you. So we have what is really a pretty heavy show, and I don't even know where to begin. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually begin. Hold on, brace yourself. With the beginning. In a way.
That's going to confuse
Did
everyone.
you say in a way or no way?
No way.
Oh, you're doubting whether I'm going to actually begin in the beginning.
Because that would be just too simple for you. You like to go for the complex, convoluted, super intellectual.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a very simple, humble man, and I think we all know that. So we're going to get into race in America. No. But if you've listened to our show Newsfire before, you will not have to fear. The count will He will be here. And how, we have 4 segments. Count. How many is that?
1.
And we have a countdown too later on too, which is going to be exciting. So first we're going to look at racism in America. Racism is real in America, and it is institutional, and it is not what it used to be. Even though a lot of Black Lives Matter folks. I don't want to say too much here, do I? So what do you say? Okay, and then after that, we're going to get into the guns. What they're doing with the guns. And then we're going to get into we want to talk about Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood, and then we're going to wrap that part up with the war on poverty, and then at the end we'll probably pull each other's hair out.
The war
on poverty. This is the war on poverty.
You mean the class war?
No, the war on poverty. Johnson's war on poverty. Johnson's war on poverty. It worked. Nobody's poor anymore. Yeah, he was. Yeah, but I didn't get that in this segment. It's not about that. But it's pretty. You'll see. You know what? And actually, Dimitri, you haven't even heard that segment yet. So you're going to be here for the first time. And you're going to have to respond on the fly. So good luck with that.
Well, I have.
You get to hear it. Don't worry, I'll let you hear it.
Will there be lava shooting out of my ears?
You will. It is. I saved. It's not the best for last, but it's the capper. So are we ready to begin? We're going to begin with. And what we're going to be playing something. We're going to be playing a little bit audio sound bites for the history of the Black Lives Matter movement. And then we're going to be playing a segment from a really excellent interview, which I'll explain later. It's from the School Sucks podcast.
From Ferguson, Missouri to Oakland, California, people across the country are reeling and From Ferguson, Missouri to Oakland, California, people across the country are reeling and aching at the grand jury's decision to not indict Darren Wilson in the shooting death of unarmed teen Mike Brown. They see it as another example of a broken justice system and police mistreatment of people of color. Their message is simple but strong. Black Lives Matter. What's your reaction to the Ferguson grand jury's decision not to charge Darren Wilson?
I feel there's a lot of fuckery going on.
And I apologize for the language, but there is some language in the show.
And each one teach one, because things like this happen.
Each one teach one.
It's not the first time, but it's one of the biggest balloons that ever popped.
You're from St. Louis.
Yeah, I'm from St. Louis.
How do you feel about the decision that Darren Wilson walks?
I feel like he should be guilty.
He should be guilty. He should be guilty. He should be guilty.
You know what I'm saying? I feel like all this stuff is outrageously crazy, you know?
It hurts. It hurts like it could have been me. So it hurts.
Now listen to how she puts this.
The injustice. It could have been anybody. It could have been white, brown, yellow.
See that? White, brown, yellow. Early on,
green. It don't matter
they were like,
but
oh,
the
man,
part that really hurts is the fact that murder was unjustified.
My reaction was very disappointing.
This is when it starts to turn real rough. This is the Eric Garner, which actually was an unjustified. I mean, there's nothing justified.
Marching on New York, massive protest tonight blocking major entry points into Manhattan, creating
this girl coming up.
nightmare on mass.
Wait to hear this girl.
Continuing to get their message across, angry over the decision not to indict the police officer in the Eric Garner chokehold case.
As thousands of protesters zigzagged across the city, they came close to several major arteries, including the Holland Tunnel. Police blocked it off so demonstrators couldn't go in, but it also meant that traffic couldn't go in either. Earlier, demonstrators streamed up Broadway by the thousands, blocking traffic for nearly an hour. Some drivers joined in, raising their arms in solidarity. Others were left frustrated with nowhere to go.
This is disgusting. That's what I think about what's happening. I'm never going to get home tonight.
People just want to get home. Right over here, where we went, dead cops. And then shortly after this, you have the cop shooting in New York.
So she was right. It was disgusting.
It was, yeah.
thank you, Seattle, for being one of the most progressive cities in the United States of America.
They don't like it.
The serpent turns on the master.
The Frankenstein turns.
Okay. Well, ask him. Okay.
Shutting this event down.
Do not listen to her. Your event will be shut down.
With home community, do they have this sort of
They're black. They're Black Lives Matter. It's, that's the authority. They created this beast.
We are going to let you on the mic. Okay. All right, so we are trying to be reasonable.
Wait,
we are
trying
to be reasonable.
Watch.
We are trying to be reasonable.
Yeah.
We are going to give you the mic.
You
after Senator Sanders. After Senator Sanders. After
Stop
Senator
talking.
Sanders.
Stop talking.
After Senator Sanders.
So it's already turned ugly. It degenerated pretty quick.
After Senator Sanders.
This is,
all right.
on the one hand, extremely disturbing.
Hillary don't play.
You think she had him all killed for this?
Now here, Hillary, if she might have.
We're winning all over the
No,
country.
Donald
We're
really
winning in
doesn't play.
Ohio against Kasich, who's totally overrated, by the way. We're winning all over. Do I hear somebody over there?
Donald is not going to play. Hillary, she wasn't playing, but she paid lip service.
You know, you
Donald
have one
isn't
guy
even
over
paying
there
lip
shouting.
service.
We have thousands of people, and you'll read about him tomorrow. They'll say, oh, the room had a picket. All right, yeah, get him the hell out of here, will you, please?
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Get him out of
Why
here.
not just
Throw him out.
Get him the hell out of here.
Yeah, they're not behaving like people in civil society.
No.
This is
Intimidation is not civil.
This is more intimidation.
Martin Luther King is not about intimidation.
Right.
Do they really? I have to say that. Do Black Lives Matter? They do? They're murdering their babies at the
No, Black Lives Matter.
Of course they do. But why don't these people answer that question? Why are you...
Here, listen to her. Girl gets up in his face. She's protesting. She's shouting with everybody else. She's going along with them. It's always me. One of us. Come on. Pigs in the blanket. I'm like pig. That's what they're doing. They're basically going to murder.
In a different time, these people would have been arrested for all sorts of stuff.
Okay, go ahead, because I don't want to miss what's going to happen next. Go ahead.
In another time, would these people not have been arrested for inciting violence?
Well, yeah, they
killing
would have
cops.
been.
Oh my
Calling,
God! If
calling
you and
for
I
the
were,
murdering of police,
if you and I went down the street and said "kill all cops," you'd
I'd
be
say
arrested.
that. I just want to say, I know these folks are going to be shocked to this, but they're seriously violating them. Yeah, they're in total violation of them. The non-aggression principle for those uninitiated.
Nap, dude, you got to be careful how you say nap when you're talking about.
That's inappropriate. That is. I'm not a part of this show.
That's what I thought you were going.
Not even a part of this show. I don't know. I don't know this man. He's only been in America since 1974. What do you expect?
And I got nappy hair.
So I'm about ready to go back in, and this woman, I can't remember her name, but she's talking to Rachel Deletzel, the I'm black, but I'm not black. And this is a very interesting exchange that happens here.
Understand, yeah.
Because there were some people that felt that you never identified yourself as white. So, like when you went to Howard University, some people felt like they never knew you were white, you were black. And so they felt like maybe the scholarship or when you got admitted to Howard, that took an opportunity from a black woman. So that's why a lot of people, it's like, you can identify, well, you're beautiful, but we're trying to understand
Is she beautiful?
why in some instances you never told people that you were white.
Yeah.
I mean, are you ashamed of being white?
There's the question. Oh, let me pause that. Are you ashamed of being white? Think about Rachel Deletzel. I mean, the culture is changing so fast, where it is becoming, it's becoming a bad thing to be a white person. And the justification of it is, of course, that we've gone so long with everybody else feeling bad about being their race. It's time for you to feel bad about who you are. And that's morality. That's high morality. That's the way you want to do things. Now, in your case, you are screwed, blued, and tattooed. Because on the one hand, to the people that don't like whitey, you're white. But no, you're white to them. No, you're white to them. But to the white people, especially the proud white people, the real racist, actually. There are real white racists. I don't know if you know this. You're not white enough.
I've met a few, trust me.
You're hosed. You're totally hosed.
I've had engagements.
Yeah, no matter how you slice it, you're a victim. Dude, you should get money from the government.
I should. The uncomfortable interactions I've had were where there was uncomfortable situations. It wasn't with people who were ethnic. It was with white people.
Oh yeah, I know.
So I'm not too concerned about the non-whites as I am.
Well, you should be concerned about the non-whites who are part of this group who will look at you and you'll be whitey to them. You haven't met them yet, but they exist.
I have. I grew up with them. I know exactly who you're talking about.
You've met Black Lives Matter folks?
I've met militant people from all sides of the rainbow.
So let's see how Rachel answers the question. Ready? Are you ashamed of being white? Ready?
I'm not white.
Dude, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to Rachel.
Oh, sorry.
Okay? No, let me tell you something. I'm black. I can't be you. I can't reverse myself.
So they came. If three people came up, one of them had a recorder, and they instantly when they came on the block.
This also has some language in it, and this is when you had that shooting in, I believe it was it Chicago, where you had the 5 Black Lives Matter folks that were shot.
Yeah.
Well, here's the explanation of how that happened from the Black Lives Matter people themselves. It's very telling. And again, I pardon the language.
I was recording everything like this, like they were trying to get people faces. So I was sitting down on the fire, my brother called my name, and he told me to come here or whatever. And then everybody started rushing them at the same time.
Tell them to take off their mask.
They said, take off your mask. Why you got your mask on? They was like, we ain't got to take off our mask.
Fuck no.
And they just kept having the camera in
everybody's face saying,
like,
fuck no.
Yeah, just moving it around and whatnot. So we go back, we go over here and shit. We trying to get them to move around. And it's people like, we debating whether they white supremacists or not because one of them got a Black Lives Matter sign. But they all had their face masks.
They all had face masks
uncovered.
And cover. We tell them
somebody
all you gotta do is the one that had the Black Lives Matter. I said all y'all gotta do is take off your mask.
So somebody out the crowd punched one of them. They hit the gate over here. After that, one of them started reaching and backing up.
I'm like, he got a gun.
So after they hit the gate again, they hit this way. They went around the corner. Somebody hit somebody else, and they hit the gate one more time. And after that, they started running back, and then the crowd started chasing them down there.
I'm telling them like they got a gun. Don't follow them. Don't chase them down there. They got a gun.
They reaching. They reaching for the gun or whatever. So they hitting the block. They running down the block, and we turn around.
I tell him like, no, we turning around.
He telling me to turn around, so I go back, and then we telling the crowd to come back. Like, come back, don't go down there. They got a gun. As soon as they continue to run after them, and then as soon as they got them down there, they try to get them to a spot where one of them cameras at, and they start opening fire. They let off about 8 rounds, and they shot 5 people.
When I listen to this, I think of the irony and the stark contrast in the language used in the 60s and 70s when protesters were out there trying to get equal rights for minority groups and so forth. And when you listen to the leaders of those movements, you hear eloquent speaking and they're not just saying BS. Their eloquent speech is reflecting elegant ideas, complex and high intellect. And when I listen to these people, I say, what the hell happened? These people can barely read and write. You can tell by the way they speak. Dat.
Well,
Dat is a word in the English language.
We are actually going to get into that in the last segment.
What's the stupidification?
We're going to get into that in the last segment. You haven't heard it yet.
But when it's striking to listen to the Black Lives Matter people speak.
It's intentional. What's happened to these communities is absolutely intentional.
Well,
and we're going to get into it. That last segment, it's going to cover a number of things, and one of those is the Mouse Utopia.
Ooh.
And you'll see what I'm talking about. So we're going to dive into now. Well, let me play this part.
Thaddeus Russell speaks with Brent Veneau about the Black Lives Matter movement. Russell is a college professor and author of the book A Renegade History of America, and Brett is the host of the School Sucks podcast, where this interview originally took place.
This is very multifaceted, right? In this term, social justice warrior is like a huge catch-all. But part of it is this white savior complex. Mm-hmm. I think that's a term you've used before. I never saw anything like that, I think, until Coney 2012. But it's funny, when I saw it, it made me understand the progressive movement at the beginning of the 20th century much better, which I always just thought of as evil before that. You know, I didn't really have a very nuanced view until I saw like Jason Russell in Invisible Children. I was like, oh, that's kind of what that is. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it was enough of a similarity for me to grasp the progressive agenda a little bit better. But yeah, why don't we just start? I mean, I think I want to treat this like an introduction. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this. I know you are in the middle of a controversy where I think you'd like to be. And it's been the case for over a year, because I know when you did the Rogan show, it was the rape allegations controversy at Occidental, and now you've moved into this mandatory cultural sensitivity training. Is that what they're calling it?
Diversity training.
Diversity training. Is this term valid? First of all, social justice warrior.
I mean, it's an epithet, so you know, I don't know how useful it is. I mean, I've used it a few times myself. I prefer to be a little more precise in our analysis of people and phenomena and ideologies, and that's sort of one of my major frustrations with the current climate on campuses and this particular iteration of what do you want to call it, political correctness or social justice, whatever. But there's a very imprecise analysis that goes on, which is, you know, that everything is what's called structural racism, which now really means almost nothing, because it's been applied to everything from apartheid South Africa to someone saying, where are you from? Mm-hmm. So I think what we need to do is look at some history. The college campus of 2015 is a very particular context.
And I want to add,
and this is another thing that gets,
because this is where the stuff is
there's a lot of conflation going on
from the colleges.
There is structural racism here, there, and everywhere, and it's all the same. And not only is Ferguson the same as Yale, but 2015 is the same as 1963, right? And 1853. It's very, very frustrating to me that we don't sort of draw distinctions between those times.
I'm going to say it's anachronistic.
Now, that's not to say
there you go.
That it is super awesome and perfect to be a black student on a mostly white campus in 2015. In fact, I think it is. I've always suspected and basically known that it's quite difficult to be a black kid on a mostly white campus in the contemporary era. But what they experience, and I do think it is racism of a sort, is a very different animal than the racism that they're talking about.
Yeah, they're talking science. Well, I don't want to jump the shark.
They're jumping here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but do you want me to not jump?
Don't jump.
I'm not going to jump then. I was going to jump for you guys and give you guys a sneak peek, but Dimitri says no.
Very different thing.
Right.
The racism that they tend to talk about doesn't exist in respectable American discourse anymore. It is shunned. It is underground. It does exist in America, and you can see it almost entirely in anonymous forums, right?
Mm-hmm.
That tells you that it is driven underground, that it's not respectable, it's not tolerated. You will be punished severely, culturally, socially, and otherwise if you utter the N-word. In fact, we now have to say the N-word. right? That's another example of our piece of evidence that we live in a very different time in terms of racial politics. But what you hear from these college protests and from the piece that the TC left in general is that, the structural racism today, they constantly link it to Alabama in the 1950s and to Georgia in the 1850s and to Jim Crow. So here, quick history lesson. I don't know if we've done this on your show. I can't remember. I think not, but it's absolutely essential. So the kind of racism that they're talking about, historians generally refer to as scientific or classical racism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which is a very, very particular thing, which was invented. Most historians agree, although there's some debate about this, but most historians agree, and I certainly
never a classical racist.
Was invented at about the time of the American Revolution, in the age of the revolutions, democratic revolutions in France, America, and elsewhere, in places where there was slavery. The argument goes that prior to that period, the late 18th century, there certainly were people who said not nice things about Africans, but there was no sort of systematic, coherent body of thought on race as a biological category. There was no systematic body of thought on race as races of people being distinct and being hierarchical, some races being better than others, and that those things were biologically determined, right?
Yep.
That's what happened beginning in about the 1770s, 1780s. And Thomas Jefferson was actually a main driver in that. He wrote Notes on the State of Virginia, which everyone should read, which is one of the first scientific racist tracts. He goes through sort of, the skull size and the facial features and the behaviors of blacks, and says that this is evidence that they are a biologically distinct and inferior race and therefore should be slaves. At the very same time he's writing this stuff, what else is Thomas Jefferson doing? He's saying, very, very, very famously, all men are created equal. Okay, so the argument is among historians is that Jefferson and his crew had to sort of overcome that contradiction, right? By saying all men are created equal and owning slaves, hello, what are we going to do here? So the argument goes that what they did to resolve that contradiction was invent scientific racism. Invent this system of this set of ideas that purportedly showed that a particular group of people that they just happened to enslave were biologically destined to be slaves, were biologically incapable of being men like the rest of us, were biologically incapable of being full citizens. If you buy that argument that it was invented then, there's some debate on this, but I'd say most historians who are serious about this question agree, and the guy who wrote the seminal book on this his name was David Bryan Davis, a historian at Yale. That set of ideas, phrenology, people who know about this, like the study of skull shapes and sizes,
that's your thing, right? Phrenology? You do that?
And physiognomy.
Phrenology's fun.
Yep. That
it's a bumpy road, though.
Scientific racism was developed beginning in the 1780s and 90s, and then really took off in the 19th century, and peaked sort of at the turn of the 20th century, and died or was replaced during World War II. So you see this massive explosion of so-called scientists and social scientists at the most elite institutions in higher education, all the Ivies, writing book after book after book, explaining how this race and that race are different and inferior to the white race.
Of course the climate's warming.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's the wrong. Yes, exactly. You're science denier.
It is standard discourse in higher education. It's standard discourse among American intellectuals and by the 1920s among politicians.
Right.
And all of that was the justification for the 1924 National Ordinance Immigration Restriction Law, which essentially cut off all immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe, because by then, white people we would consider to be white from those parts of the world were considered to be biologically distinct and inferior races.
No, you're not.
So scientific racism justified the radical restriction of immigration in 1924. Okay. World War II comes along. We fight the fascists, they're racists. We therefore have to demonize all of them in order to fight that war and everything they stand for. Racism, scientific racism, put forward, of course, by the Nazis, had to be demonized as well. It became very difficult.
Right. Their plan of action was easy to demonize, obviously.
It became very difficult to be a public racist when we're fighting people who are very famously racist.
Right.
Along comes a new set of ideas, which we now call, we, like academics, call racial liberalism. And the seminal text,
racial liberalism.
The seminal text, racial liberalism, was Gunnar Myrdal's An American Dilemma, published in 1944.
Oh, he's a racist.
In which he argued, A, that black people were not biologically inferior, so that's the good part, but B, that they could and should be assimilated into American culture and society, right? So a scientific racist is by definition opposed to assimilation and integration because they believe, of course, that these people can't be integrated or assimilated. So they never tried to change the culture.
That would be Margaret Sanger.
Of black people or other inferior races. They just left them be or tried to exclude them, right? Stay separate from them. So these racial liberals come along, and the good thing they do is demolish this idea that the human race is made up of distinct biological races and there's a hierarchy among them. What I would say, the bad thing they do is say, following that, we not only can but should integrate and assimilate them, right? Which of course is actually white supremacist because it presumes that the culture that they assimilate into is the dominant white one in the United States of America and Northern.
Yeah, I want to pause here. You let that sink in. See, that's
assimilate them to get rid of them.
I learned, segregation is the noble thing, and I believe if he doesn't drop in some more information, I will drop it in afterwards. But I believe he does. But it turns the whole thing on its head. Segregation is white supremacism because it presupposes that the white culture is the superior culture. See, what was really going on in the South was not that black folks were inferior to white folks and that they had an inferior culture. What was, and you'll find out exactly how, even more how that was really true. What was going on in the South was that black folks were being coercively prevented from not fully integrating to society because, there are people groups, there are nationalities, that want to hold on to their identity. They don't want to disintegrate into white culture, but they want to integrate to be able to trade and commerce and share ideas.
In the short windows of history where they were allowed to, they flourished.
They excelled, right?
Excelled, and that was a threat.
And when we get into that fourth segment, because the Mouse Utopia, Mouse Utopia is what they had to do.
When you look at the demographics of the South, and most of the Deep South in the East is 30% African American. That is a substantial part of the population. That is a huge threat to white culture down there.
Yeah.
Because if they do well financially,
Yeah, and because we don't want to have we don't want to let the free market decide what ideas and cultures win the day. We want to protect ourselves with government guns.
Will the servant become the master?
Could be. So we'll move on.
Yeah, it's like imperialism, like giving them the gift of our culture.
It is absolutely cultural imperialism.
Right. Pretty good.
That set of beliefs completely supplanted scientific racism in respectable discourse in the United States and in Europe, right? After World War II, you really couldn't be a scientific racist and hold a position in academia. It was difficult to win election. Even in the South, even the arch segregationists of the South, the 1950s and 60s, they didn't actually walk around saying nigger anymore. You couldn't, even those guys didn't actually say nigger in public. It was actually not okay even for them to say it in public, right? It tells you a lot. I mean, it's a massive sea change, okay? And of course, this whole ethos of racial liberalism gives birth in part, part of it, in part it gave birth to the civil rights movement, obviously. Brown v. Board of Education, which integrated the schools, was completely informed by racial liberalism and Gunnar Myrdal specifically. And it particularly took hold in higher education.
And I want to make it clear, in Brown v. Board of Education, it wasn't just a ruling that you couldn't prevent blacks from going into white schools. I understand that. The ruling was not just that you couldn't prevent this, but you must forcefully integrate blacks with white culture.
Whether they want to or not.
Whether they want to or not. And I'm going to play more, and I hopefully he'll touch on this. I don't know if I got this in this part of the interview or not. If not, I'll touch another key part.
And it has been essentially the dominant racial ideology in higher education to this day. Not the scientific racism of before World War II, but this new set of ideas, which contains within it not the idea that black people should be excluded and killed and lynched and enslaved, but that they should be made to become like us. And this is another part of racial liberalism, and Murdoch's been very explicit about this, that we, white people, should be responsible for uplifting our black brothers and sisters. Because they can't do it themselves, because they've been so degraded by centuries of slavery and oppression that they can't do it by themselves. They must be lifted up by whites.
Right. And this is
whites bear the responsibility for raising them up to our standards, which is paternalism. So paternalism, to me and many other people, I'm hardly the only person who's made this critique, paternalism is central to racial liberalism, right? Which is not racism in the sense of scientific racism. It actually does say that they can be lifted up, right?
Yeah.
They are biologically equal to us. But there's sort of you could call it a cultural racism, or perhaps white supremacy. It could be white supremacy, right? The assumption there is that our culture, the one of whites, is the one that is good, that everyone needs to rise into. So that's what these kids on campuses today are dealing with. What happens is, for about 50 years now, since World War II, right, there's actually been a demand by whites to bring them into our schools. That's what Brown v. Board of Education was.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you read the decision of Brown v. Board of Education, it says we have this whole class of people who have no interest in being Americans. They have no interest in being serving in the military. They have no interest in working hard at their jobs because they've been excluded all these years, right? So the first thing we want to do is get them into our schools to train them to become good Americans. Okay, so that's run through higher education as well ever since. There's been a major demand among white liberals who have run institutions of higher education since then to get black people into our schools, right?
Yeah.
In part to assimilate them. Okay. So that's what happens now. These kids get plucked, really, out of these neighborhoods they live in that are mostly black, and put in these institutions that are mostly white, and that culturally and historically are very white. So they end up being isolated in these places, and often the demand is so great for to put these kids in here that the institutions are forced to lower their standards in terms of credentials. For black students, you cannot get enough in to fill the quotas unless you lower standards in terms of SAT scores and grade point averages, right? To get them in. So what happens is, not all, but a large number of those kids are not prepared to function in a college, and so they often have a hard time or they fail. So the whole thing is clearly a recipe for disaster, and it's clearly a recipe, in particular, for tremendous resentment among black students at these colleges. You can understand why they have tremendous rage. Now, I understand their demands and the grievances they make don't often match this, what I'm talking about, and that's my issue. But you have to begin with an understanding of why they might be pissed off.
Now, I want to add something here that he did cover in that interview, but I didn't have it in this interview. He pointed out that before all of this, the segregation movement, if you will, you had numerous black colleges that were doing very well, that were producing excellence. They had the bestest and the brightest of the black community, and it was their own unique black culture, but very sophisticated. Every bit as sophisticated as white culture. And what happened with the segregation movement then, all the bestest and the brightest, they stopped going to the black colleges. And the black colleges started to die, and the quality of the black colleges started to go down, and you didn't have that unique black experience, that unique black culture. And even more, in all of these cities in the South, even with all the stuff that was going on, the blacks found a way to do business, to get things done. And so what you had in these southern cities, you had these black business districts that were thriving, that were doing very well, that gave the professional blacks in the black colleges places to go. And what happened with segregation is all of those black businesses, all of those black business districts disappear.
Right, because it's a threat. Because truly independent black people would be a threat. Independent, empowered people are a threat. And 30% of your population, that's a big deal.
So what we've covered in this first segment is essentially the whole point is, I would argue that it's not really about racism, it's about power. So the powers that be, most of them happen to be white. They've developed an identity as white, as whatever it happened to be, the people with power. And they figured out a way to keep people from cutting in on their power. And so they had this ideal of individual liberty, which is very inconsistent with keeping other people out of their power. So they invented scientific racism. And then the Germans came along, and they're like, dude, we gotta do something.
Ruined it.
They totally hosed it. So they're like, dude, they're the bad. What are we gonna do? We gotta separate ourselves. And remember, the Democratic Party for the first part of the 20th century, up to really, I'd say Johnson is where the Democratic Party takes a shift in terms of the type of racism.
Without question.
And we'll get into that. This is the war on poverty. So they shift from scientific racism to paternalism. But that wasn't good enough, because even that shift, where now they're going to have to take them into white culture, suddenly culture shock, force them into these places that they're not comfortable. You're not going to perform very well. But still, there was a chance that the black community might still eventually do well. And we'll get to that in part 4. So I'm going to end part 1, and we're going to get set for part 2. And part 2 is the new Jim Crow laws.
Was that a gunshot? That sounded kind of like a laser beam.
Dude, that was the best gunshot that I can come up. No, it was not Star Wars, by the way. Han Solo dies, his son kills him.
Thank God.
I'm not sure if that's true, but I saw this meme on Facebook, and it was kind of well, let's just say it had an image on it that was not Christian, I'll just say, with a female. And like, what the heck is this on my timeline for? And all of a sudden I see this flash, and I haven't seen the movie. It's not out. So if that's actually true, don't blame me. It flashes. Han Solo dies. His son kills him. You're devastated, aren't you?
Totally.
But we have something more important to discuss. We just got done with. Well, you're leading here. I don't want to take your lead.
I'm not a good leader.
Come on, lead. And remember, he's only been in America since 1974. Okay, I've been here since the 60s. I think we know who's got this. Go ahead.
I did a little bit of background and research in demographics in the United States and where gun laws happen to be the strongest. And there are 3 dates that really stuck out for me. The first date was 1791, when the the amendments were passed, along with the Second Amendment. The second date was 1837, when Georgia made handguns illegal. They banned handguns.
When did they do this?
1837.
No way. I don't even know about this. This is shocking.
And immediately, it was ruled unconstitutional.
Oh.
Immediately. Said it violates the Second Amendment. So I was like, huh. So they kind of had the argument. They had the argument started way back when.
They were starting immediately to try to, dude, this whole letting people have guns thing.
So 30 or so years later, you have black codes, which is the beginning of Jim Crow. And the black codes were severe laws restricting blacks in the South from owning guns, from owning certain kinds of businesses and such. So and that's 1865. Now, the NRA was formed in 1871, and their pretext was, we need to keep America able to shoot. We need good marksmanship. When in fact, what they were doing was arming Southern blacks who couldn't arm themselves. That's what they were doing. It's a very interesting beginning to the
they were simply empowering black people.
They were trying
to protect themselves. When somebody crossed the nap line, the blacks had the power to answer.
Please explain to our viewers what the nap line is.
The nap line is the non-aggression principle. This is when you take
the non-aggression principle of whom?
It's when you take coercive action against someone to force them to do something they don't want to do. It's a libertarian thing.
It's a libertarian thing.
Yeah. Or ANCAPper, or there's a whole voluntarist. There's a whole other host of names.
So when you look at maps of demographics, you are struck by the Deep South's high population of African Americans. African Americans in the northern states only truly exist in any numbers in the cities. Outside of that, very few. The entire countryside in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Midwest, West, it is void of large populations of African Americans. It is the Deep South that has the highest concentration.
Yeah, still, because you hear about the Great Migration.
Right. It's all BS.
Well, I will say this, though. One thing this doesn't show is there really was a migration. And when you see little purple dots, does that really show how many folks are within those purple dots? Because there are high concentrations in those areas. But still, interesting, what I would say is, whatever the numbers play out, the distribution of the black population is much more even in the South than it is in the North. It's all within the cities. Which what happens around the 50s and the 60s? 50s and the 60s is when a lot of this. I mean, it would happen before that, but this is when a lot of this migration was occurring. All these blacks were moving up to the cities to find a new life, to get new jobs, and part 4 will deal with the solution.
So you have in the South laws written to limit gun ownership of blacks. And then as those people in part 4 move north, many of those laws move with them.
But that's not in part 4. Those laws are not in part 4. I'm covering the war on poverty in part 4, so you tell us what happened.
Well, what happened is the Jim Crow laws follow them north, but how they were expressed changes. Now it's not, hey, we got to keep the guns out of the blacks' hands. Now it's, we got to save the children.
So it's kind of like, okay, you got a bunch of folks in here that you don't want to have guns. I know there's some white people here. We don't care if they're white. You know what? Screw it. Let's just take them away from all of them. We don't have to deal with this mess because, we're not racist anymore. We're not scientific racists anymore. So we're all equal. So let's discriminate against everyone in the cities because there's too many blacks in the cities.
Look, if you're poor and white in the cities, Margaret Sanger would have said,
that's true.
You're dysgenic.
Right. And that's coming up in part 3.
What is dysgenic?
You're going to find out in part 3. Dude, we're teasing people all through the show. I love this. So if we were, is it sexist of me to say if I was a woman, I'd be like showing some leg right now? If I was a man, I'd be showing my chest hairs. Is that better? Does that save it? Does that? Whoa! I'm a man.
If you were a woman,
I'd be a very attractive woman. Yeah. To my dog.
So I also came across some information from the Huffington Post.
Oh, fine job.
Yes,
fine job.
about Mayor Ron Emanuel, who
Rom Emanuel? Dead fish?
who said that we should stop videotaping people who are buying and selling guns. And the only reason they did that is to discourage inner city people from buying guns. And I believe it was in 2012 they made carrying. Maybe it was 2012. Yeah, they made carrying in Chicago legal again, 2014, and crime plummeted that year. I mean, within months, crime plummeted.
Yeah, and I don't want to say if there's a direct correlation, but it's
So
fascinating and fascinating data, and numbers never lie.
Yeah, but my favorite part of this is that the city council voted to stricken assault weapons regulations in Chicago.
Oh,
Do we have some crickets in the background?
wait. I didn't hear you right. I know I didn't hear you right because it sounded like they did something that was like liberty.
No, the city council voted to strengthen assault weapons regulations.
Strengthen. I thought you said stricken, like strike down, like that was the best you could. Because whenever he sees the word strike and down together, his brain just shuts down on him. But in this case,
But wait, so that's like saying
strengthen.
murder is bad. So we're going to create laws that once we kill you for killing somebody, we're going to kill you again.
Yeah.
Because assault weapons have been illegal.
Already illegal.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you strengthen laws against assault weapons when there are none on the market?
No, not a word from them about pipe bombs. Not a word. They're not trying to regulate pipe bombs at all. They don't care. But you know why it is? It's because inner city people aren't using pipe bombs. Because if they were,
pipe bombs are highly illegal. I hate to tell you. If you're
what?
caught,
What are you talking about?
If you're caught,
Wait,
with a
pipe bombs are illegal?
Dude,
Dude, when did this happen? Oh my gosh, seriously. Man.
When the anarchists
the bad anarchists. The red anarchists. They're not anarchists at all. Even though they were the first to be called anarchists, they're not. I'm going to get hate mail from the ANCOMs. ANCOMs means anarcho-communists.
And well, you should. Because you hate communists.
I do, actually.
Yeah.
I don't hate communists. I don't hate the people.
You
Because
hate
I love
communism.
everyone. I hate communism. Yeah. Although I do hate your beard.
Because you're jealous.
No, it's all trimmed up nice. It was like kind of crazy. I was like making fun of him, but it was like kind of cool. You know, it was like I wanted to go walk around with
when I would
you.
go to his house, his wife would go.
I know. I wanted to walk around with him and say. I wanted to walk around with him in shopping malls and say, isn't Abdullah? Isn't it? It's Mecca time, right? Isn't it? Where's your prayer mat?
Do you have your cell phone handy?
Yes. Do you have your cell phone handy? Yeah, just like. Yes, are not nervous at all. Could you hold this bag here? Let me get my cell phone out and walk away. Oh, by the way, this whole show. I should note that this whole show is parody and any actual relation to any individuals, living or dead. It's purely coincidental. The show is intended as parody and parody only. Do not take any advice that we share with you on this show, or most likely you will die.
Except take your vitamins.
I'll take your vitamins and love the government. And love the government.
Love thy government.
And you know what I forgot to say?
Government is G-O, gov, and God is G-O, God. Gov.
A VD.
God.
Whoa, that's
what?
A V in it, oh gosh. V, D, oh
Gov.
gosh.
Gov.
Freaky.
Gov. I love my gov.
I love my gov, man. Hell gov.
So.
Oh, wait, one more thing before I let you go on, because I forgot to say this.
I don't really have much else to say.
This is a bipcot.org, bipcot, bipcot.org licensed show. That means that you're free to use the show however you want, unless, of course, you are with the government. Yes. Yes.
So, if you're afraid of black folk, you sure as hell don't want them to have guns now, do you?
Oh, heck no. Because guns really are power. They are sovereignty-making power.
Correct. Because power is power, and running around on the street saying Black Lives Matter doesn't mean shit.
Not really.
It doesn't.
It just makes you a target against insane people. And the insane people will eventually come after you, which is just what Daddy Gov wants. He wants the insane people to come after the Black Lives Matter folks.
Well, because a lot of the Black Lives Matter folks are insane themselves.
Well, they are,
So,
and they're whipping the insane folks up. And a lot of them are insane because of what the government has done to them. Not just to them, but through the generations. What the government has created. They are Victor Frankenstein. Got anything else? Are we done with the segment? Did we nail this? Did we hit this home?
Not really, but I think we should move on because I think the subjects that are coming are far more important than this.
But it was important for us to take note of how. So the first part, we got what racism really is now in America, that we have paternalistic racism. What was the other word? I can't remember what the dude said. There's paternalistic racism. There was another word that they used. Well, whatever it was. Cares? Oh, well.
You could rewind.
I could rewind, but if I did that, that would be inappropriate.
And it would sound like this.
Yeah, which would be weird. People might not understand that. And now we covered the key part that they have to make sure always, number one, before they can do anything else, they must make sure that black people don't have guns.
Whenever historically a group is about
unless they're criminals, they're okay with the criminals having guns because criminals aren't going to rise up against the government. They're just gonna kill each other, which is good because population control.
Well, if you look at the news and you look at the statistics, if you're a working class black man with a family and you're caught with a gun, minimum 5 years.
Right.
And the bail will be like $5 million.
So we're talking about what happens if you deal guns?
Well, hold on. Now, if you're caught with a gun on the street and you're a gangbanger and you've been caught half a dozen times before, you're probably out within 2 weeks on bail. And
because you're good. You're an efficient killer.
Yeah. And you probably won't see jail time for a couple of years while the jury is deliberating and the trial is
whatever, all the
coming
legal
together.
process.
Yeah, the entire legal process is in action. So, and when you do get jail time, yeah, you're out on good behavior in 6 months?
Or Obama let you out. Like he'd let out a bunch of people.
So the middle class, hardworking family, nuclear family types are punished for defending themselves.
In draconian manner.
Yeah. While those who are completely out of control and unsocial and deviant are allowed out over and over and over again. That should strike everyone as strange.
It's not strange. It makes absolute sense,
of course.
Especially.
But getting back to a more important point, when the Turks were facing their empire being torn apart, they, on multiple occasions, tried to create peace treaties with their subjects. And one of the few groups that actually fell for it and actually disarmed were the Armenians. Yeah. Does everybody know what happened to the Armenians? 1.5 million men, women, and children were murdered?
Yep.
Yeah. If the Armenians, all 1.5 million of them, had been armed, even little old ladies and old men, it would have been much harder for the Turks to press their way into the territories that were dominated by Armenians and murder them all. And what was the second law passed by Hitler when he ascended the throne? To disarm the population.
Not the whole population, the ones that he knew as their target. The strategic disarmament. It wasn't wholesale. There was plenty of people that could still hold on to their guns. But if you weren't part of the establishment, the party, nobody would vouch for you. Certainly if you were a Jew, then no guns for you. And not only no guns for you, but hand your guns in. And what did they do? They handed the guns in.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go to the third part of our show, which should blow your mind.
Are we going now?
Dude, we're going to go. Hold on 1 second. I have to get it. I have to do things.
Are we going now?
Dude, seriously. So this is about 20 minutes long. And this is a pre-recorded segment of this show. We did this earlier in the week. Dude, we're going now.
Okay, good.
Dude, we're going to talk about abortion and Planned Parenthood, and you want to make jokes.
Dude,
And you want to make jokes. Have you no decency?
I'm not making jokes.
Have you no decency, sir?
Not really. No.
Oh, okay.
Are we going now?
Yeah, we're going to go now.
Let's go now.
We're going to go.
I started doing some research about how racism is alive and well in the United States and how it's kind of being missold. So I wanted to understand the interaction between institutions like Planned Parenthood and their origins, gun control, and lots of other subjects, and how they are involved in modern-day racism. So I went to their webpage and clicked on History. And what I found was that they have a section called History and Successes.
History and successes.
Correct.
Successes?
Yeah.
You keep using the word success.
Successes.
You keep using the word successes.
Yes.
I do not think it means what you think it means.
Yes. So I printed it out, and while it was printing, I looked at the icon of the print job, and it said, Martin Luther King. I said, what? I'm printing the wrong thing. Oh my God, I got the wrong link. So I went to the printer, and I looked at it, and it was History and Successes.
And actually, I didn't even know what you're about ready to drop.
Planned Parenthood.
Where you're going with this? I know where you're going with this. I wasn't even aware of this, and I'm willing to bet most of you are not aware of this. And in the context of the whole show of what we've heard so far, this really makes sense.
It was so upsetting to see this. So I'm reading the history of Planned Parenthood and the involvement of Margaret Sanger and the early days of setting up women's clinics in Brooklyn. And I'm reading it and I'm like, wow, this woman was a real maverick. Look at her. She took on the government, which were a bunch of stiff, just old cruddy-duddies with these
old white dudes. Yeah. Just say it, old white dudes.
Victorian ideas of right and wrong. And they even had passed laws against contraception, and abortion was definitely illegal, and poor women were having 18 children, and actually Margaret Sanger's mother had 18 pregnancies, of which 11 came to term. So she had 11 brothers and sisters. And
dang.
You kind
well, 10 brothers and sisters.
Yes. There were a total of 11.
I'm just clarifying because we're all about facts here and real numbers.
Detailed oriented.
And we don't do Common Core math on this show.
No. Oh, wait.
No, we don't.
Okay, good.
No, we don't.
Good.
No.
So I'm feeling very sympathetic towards her, and I'm reading on. I'm like, wow, this woman really made some advances towards civilization. And I'm reading on, and I'm still wondering how Martin Luther King figures into this. And so I finally start getting into the bones of this, and I find a passage where Martin...
That's the sound of him turning paper, because he doesn't have stuff memorized like me, because I'm a boss.
I find a passage where it says, and it's not very deep in the literature, in 1966, Planned Parenthood Foundation of America inaugurated the PPFA Margaret Sanger Award.
Yay!
To honor the women who founded America's family planning movement.
Remember, we're talking about the scientific racist.
Absolutely.
In context to our earlier segment.
Yeah.
Significant.
In its first year, The award was bestowed upon 4 men, including the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. When I read that, I was
stunning.
Horribly upset.
And did it say what the award was for? Why he got the award?
No, it does not. He was killed 2 years later, and her thoughts on race had been pretty public up till then.
As a matter of fact, her thoughts on race would have been out in the light of day until World War II, right?
Yeah.
So the information was out there. I mean, even though they didn't have the interwebs, the information was out there. Now, I don't want to say the degree to which King knew something or didn't know something. I'd like to think that he didn't know. I don't know.
And did he receive?
Because he is one of my personal heroes. So this was like, whoa.
But did he receive this award? I mean, did he actually show up and say, "Oh, thank you so much for the award," or was it just like, "Hey, dude, you got an award from who? Planned Parenthood." Oh, okay. What's that?
But
okay.
Either way, the point is that what Margaret Sanger was doing in strategically giving an award to MLK fit her overall strategy, right?
And now, when you print out any literature from their webpage, at the very top, it says, "The revered Martin Luther King Jr."
Yep, I'm looking at it. The Reverend, but not revered. The Reverend, because he's not a pope. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.
How does that factor in?
How does it factor in? Why does it say the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.? Not a clue.
Well,
when you print, what he's saying is when you go to the site and you print it out, you'll see it on the top. It says the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. on all the pages.
And as you dive into the literature that they're providing, you go in, there's 24 pages of history, and you start to realize that they are calling out
more paper turning. I like it. He's not really turning paper at all. We just thought it would be cool special effects, so we added paper turning special effects.
The Reagan agenda. This is on Planned Parenthood's page. A victory for women. Wait, it gets good. Bush.
Your use of the word "good" is interesting.
Yeah. Bush pardons women organize.
What does that even mean?
I don't know. The Clinton years. Victories and violence.
Violence. What did they term violence? Well, there was actual some
the Bush II agenda, turning back the clock. These guys don't have an agenda, do they?
No.
I mean, so you start reading through this.
Well, they do have an agenda.
And
the agenda is to murder babies, especially of the undesired type.
Well, and so I want to read a short paragraph. It kind of comes into, that brings some things into focus. That same year, which was 1923, Sanger incorporates the American Birth Control League, an ambitious new organization that emphasizes the global issues of world population growth, disarmament, and world famine. The two.
And the two that we're really covering here is the world population and disarmament. Yes.
The two organizations subsequently merge.
Of course.
And the latter becomes Planned Parenthood Foundation of America, Incorporated.
So you have built into Planned Parenthood anti-gun, pro-baby murder, but baby murder of a specific strategic target. The targets being the poor and more specifically the blacks. Are we going to get soon into
some quotes?
Are we going to get into that? Are we going to do that? Are we going to do it now? Are you ready for that? Or you got something else?
Yeah, but I just want to throw out one word. They use from the eugenics movement, which she was a big part of.
Right.
The word dysgenic.
Dysgenic.
To describe.
Now, who's they? When you say they, who are you saying?
Margaret Sanger and her lot.
Okay. So this is Margaret Sanger that on the Planned Parenthood website they're acknowledging Margaret Sanger is the founder and the inspiration, and her agenda is still being carried out, kind of.
Yeah. Without pause, it's still being carried out.
Right.
And it's even more effective today than ever. So they define dysgenics as anyone who has characteristics that are less than ideal, characteristics that would not advance the human clean race.
Which, do they have a definition of the human clean race?
Oh, we'll get into some of that.
Oh, with the quotes, we'll reveal some of that. Okay, good. We don't want to give up too much here. So,
why don't we move?
We're going to get to that?
Yeah, I think we should, because when people hear...
I think that speaks for itself.
Yeah. From her own words.
And now I'm going to hand it over to myself.
Congratulations.
You're welcome.
You are a good self.
I am a good self, passing it on to
yourself.
myself. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the top 4 all-time awesomest quotes from Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. Coming in at number 4...
Birth control must lead ultimately to a cleaner race.
Yay! Oh my gosh, that's so exciting! A cleaner race!
Yay! Clean is good!
Clean is good. Clean is good. Coming in at number 3, the all-timeiest quote from Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. Number 3.
Hordes of people are born who live, yet who have done absolutely nothing to advance the race one iota. Their lives are hopeless, repetitious. Such human weeds clog up the path, drain up the energies and the resources of this little earth. We must clear the way for a better world. We must cultivate our garden.
Ladies and gentlemen, coming in at number 2, the all-time greatest quotes from Margaret Sanger.
2. The government ought to apply a stern and rigid policy of sterilization and segregation to that grade of population whose progeny is tainted, or whose whole inheritance is such that objectionable traits may be transmitted to offspring. And the government shall give certain dynastic groups, those with bad genes, in our population, their choice of segregation or sterilization.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, after all of the fun-filled, loving quotes from Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, we give you the number 1 all-time greatest quote from Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. Here we are at number 1!
We should hire 3 or 4 colored ministers, preferably with social services backgrounds and with engaging personalities. The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We don't want the word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of the more rebellious members.
This has been the top 4 all-time quotes from the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger. So there you have it.
Wow.
Wowzer. So you want to give some sources for those?
Oof. The first one is from Margaret Sanger, obviously, in a publication called Women, Morality, and Birth Control, New York, New York, Publishing Company, 1922, page 12.
Page 12.
The second one is also, of course, from Margaret Sanger, Birth Control, Facts and Responsibilities, 1925. The next one is...
Or the third one?
Yeah. Well, we're going... It was 4, 3, 2, 1. So
oh, okay,
okay. 2. That's where I got confused.
So you need
Margaret
the count.
Yeah, they got to count
backwards. Number 4.
So
number 3.
The second to last one, A Plan for Peace.
A Plan for Peace.
Birth Control Review, April 1932, pages 107 through 108. And the last one was a letter addressed to a Dr. Clarence Gamble. And they gave a street address and so forth. And it was published several times. And in several publications. The last one that I see here was Woman's Right, A Social History of Birth Control in America, New York, Grossman Publications, 1976.
So up to 1976, it was like, yeah, man, this is good. This is good.
Okay, this is so disturbing, I don't know where to begin. My head's going to explode. They're using Martin Luther King as one of their 3 or 4 colored ministers.
Yeah, and we don't want to say that Martin Luther King was complicit or that he knew, but I mean, maybe if we find out more, we'll certainly share it on later shows. But I sure hope he didn't know more, because he is one of my personal heroes.
But does his foundation
kind of
no? And do the people
his foundation today is not what he was. It's become completely progressive, and certainly he had progressive tendencies, but as far as I knew, Martin Luther King is pro-life. So this is a difficult position.
But whether he's a Republican, that's
right. Whether he knew or whether he didn't know about this award, whether he was active, whether he participated, even if he knew nothing, even if they awarded it and he didn't show up, they were using his name.
And that's perverse.
To advance, and that is total perversion. You are using black leadership to advocate essentially for the eradication of their own people, because they were deemed by white supremacists. Progressivism has contained within it a rich history of white supremacism, starting from its very founding. Its very founding was rested on the notion that we can scientifically create the best society for the best people, and the best people were white people. I'm talking to Dimitri here, and as you guys know, Dimitri is, well, why don't you say it? Go ahead.
I'm almost white.
He's almost white. So Margaret Sanger would look at you, Dimitri, and think,
he's almost white.
He's almost white. We'll give him a little space, but not too much.
He can be.
We'll even let him
sterilized,
or maybe
or put in a ghetto with his kind.
Or maybe you would actually qualify for some degree of propagation, that you would qualify as a race that the government would deem, to a certain extent. I mean,
not ideal, but
you're not going to be like manageable. Yeah. I mean, whereas if you're black, or I don't know what other races you would deem, but certainly black, then you had to sign up for either desegregation or sterilization.
Segregation.
I'm sorry, right? Segregation or desterilisation, or right. And in our first segment of the show, we've revealed the nature of desegregation, which is not noble either. So we're done with this segment now.
Yeah.
And this is our last segment before we get into the...
Do you have any Alka-Seltzer? My stomach hurts.
Oh, but yeah, anybody else, if they need Alka-Seltzer, you guys could stop by. I'm sure that a lot of people listening need Alka-Seltzer after listening to this.
So, a correction to make?
Yeah, it's dysgenic. What did I say? Dynastic?
Yeah.
What the hell did I get dynastic from?
I don't know. I can't believe you said the H word on our show.
What did I say?
You said the H word just now on our show.
Hell?
Yeah.
Oh, dude,
You've offended me.
I said hell and shit in the previous...
Oh my gosh, microaggression! Microaggression!
Are we recording?
Yes, we're recording. Oh my gosh.
In that one section...
He knew he was recording. He's playing me.
In the one section, I said dynastic. Why the hell did I say that?
I'm just playing with you. Wait.
Damn it.
Let's not walk up that ladder that we're walking up right now.
Groups. The government should give certain dysgenic groups the choice between segregation and sterilization.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is some bone-chilling stuff.
I want her as my grandmother. So when she looks at me, she says, I see traits that we need to work on.
Yeah, it's like...
Let's not let him breed too much.
Yes,
maybe he can have
He's not quite
one
there.
offspring. But we need to have the other brother who's more white. He can have two offspring.
Maybe you can give him your wife.
Oh.
As long as it was, Cyrus.
That gets into a whole other conversation.
We're not going to get into that conversation, though. So I'm going to recap real quick what we have covered.
Let's recap real quick what we just covered.
Well, Bob, we're going to recap what we just covered.
Okay, John, let's recap what we just covered.
Yes. So we're going to do that. So we covered in the first part, we covered the emergence of the Black Lives Movement, how quickly it degenerated from, oh man, we're talking about everybody, we're talking about justice for everybody. Kill the cops, kill the pigs. Why are you afraid? Or why are you ashamed of being white? Are you ashamed of being white?
Why won't you stand with us?
Why won't you stand with us and scream, one of us, one of us? And then we went into the scientific racism, which morphed because of the Nazis and the fascists. It morphed into this paternalistic racism. And then we went into Margaret Sanger. I think I when we were doing the segment, I thought that was the last segment we were going to do, but it's actually not. The last segment that we're going to do. And
did you change your mind again?
No, I didn't change my mind. I made a mistake during the segment that we recorded. That's what happened.
You made a mistake?
I did. What I do is I make mistakes so that Dimitri doesn't feel bad. I do this intentionally. In actuality, I'm not really making a mistake. In actuality, I'm not really making... I don't make mistakes except to make people like you feel better. So I'm not actually... I fake mistakes. That is absolutely amazing. Oh, it's going to become macroaggression soon. It's going to become... I am a concealed carrier. I just threw that out there at random.
And I am a balls kicker. I'm just throwing it.
You're I don't know. I think my concealed carrier has a greater range.
I would like to see what you do to me after I kick your balls.
It's not going to be an after though. It's not going to be an option after the concealed carrier option takes place. Okay. See, that's. I mean, I'm not
speed. Dude, I can get to your balls faster than you can get to your gun.
I don't know why we're talking about
the way you carry.
Dude, are we gonna do this?
The way you carry.
Okay, let's try this. You know what? I'll tell you what. In a count of 3, draw. Ready? 1, 2. Yeah! Sucker waited till 3.
That's another microaggression.
That is a macroaggression, dude. Totally trying for a macroaggression there. So I am going to play, and you actually haven't heard this yet.
I have not.
But in a lot of ways,
this show is quite piecemeal. And I think
it's not piecemeal. It's actually it's all a piece.
Yeah, but we recorded some stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But this is the way it's going to be, folks. We are going to, about once a month, and we're not going to say like, okay, every third week, whenever we put it together, about once a month, we're going to have these types of shows, these reports, where we go in depth into a topic. And then the other shows, they're going to be a lot looser, a lot less planned, a lot more improv. So I'm going to go ahead. And I am going to mute us, and I am going to play It's about 8 minutes or so long, and it's actually called The Fake War on Poverty. Now, I'm actually I won't mute us right away because I believe that I forgot to take out the opening tag, so I'll talk over the opening tag. You'll know what I mean. You've already heard this opening tag.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps.
In 1962, John B. Calhoun laid out the specifics of his Mouse Utopia dystopia experiment in a paper called Population Density and Social Pathology.
But Calhoun's obsession with the question of overpopulation leading to extinction didn't stop there. In 1972, he devised his 25th iteration of rodent housing with Universe 25, a 101 square inch tank or 2.5 meters enclosed by walls 54 inches high or 1.37 meters high.
Each of the 16 walls had a stairwell soldered to it in the form of vertical mesh tunnels. Horizontal corridors opened off each stairwell, leading to nesting boxes, and there was an endless supply of food and clean water, as well as material to nest with.
I am going to make it clear that you're Mr. Poverty. The home and abroad, you ought to be. Well, you got your responsibilities, you got the authority, you got the power, you got the money. Now, you may not have the glands. The glands? Yeah. I got plenty of glands. All right.
Moreover, the universe was regularly cleaned, and the temperature never deviated from 68 degrees Fahrenheit. It was a predator-free, all-you-can-eat buffet of life. A true utopia. Well, except for the prison-like structure itself.
Hello, Mrs. Price.
Hi.
How you been?
Oh, grand. Living like a queen.
Mrs. Price, have you been working?
No.
Because if you have, I really have to know. Otherwise, you get into trouble.
No, I ain't been working.
Mrs. Price, you know I'm your friend, but you have to be honest with me.
I ain't been working.
Well,
out of this universe rose groups of mice known as the Beautiful Ones. Mice who retreated to their apartments to meticulously groom themselves and gorge on food, while below them the masses were entangled in a clutch of violence.
This is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
It's not a program of federal handouts to alleviate poverty temporarily. It is aid to help those who are willing to help themselves get out of poverty by building up their skills, increasing their employability.
Shriver hated the idea of handouts, which he equated with what he called cheap grace, a kind of a charity which does not empower people.
So we want to open the gates to opportunity. But we're also going to give all our people, black and white, the help that they need to walk through those gates.
So where did it all go wrong?
After 4 breeding pairs settled in their new digs, they began to reproduce. Every 60 days, the population doubled, and soon the utopia began to sour. There was plenty of room, but mice crowded into certain eating and sleeping compartments, which led to overpopulation in these areas, resulting in some serious aggressive behavior.
The violence escalated so much that soon random acts of violence were perpetrated among the rodent population, with the majority of mice entering a kind of freak-out mode, ceasing to engage in day-to-day activities like mating.
And while some dealt with population pressure by becoming antisocial and retreating to the corners, like the beautiful ones, others engaged in pansexual behavior with one another.
Female mice withstood attacks and aggressive mating behavior, eventually abandoning their offspring, some of whom were attacked by their mothers or cannibalized by other mice, even though there was plenty of food to go around.
I understand a man's been visiting you regularly this past month.
You are not supposed to spy on us.
I didn't spy on you, Mrs. Price, but someone has.
It must be that lady, that bitch across the street. She'll say anything, that bitch.
The thing is, Mrs. Price, if something comes out later and I don't know about it, you'll be in all kinds of trouble. So, if you've been seeing this man...
Well, what is this? Am I not supposed to see a man? What am I, a damn nun?
No, but if you've been sleeping with a man and he's been giving you things, I'm sorry, but I have to know.
Calhoun's experiment and the human model of life isn't exactly apples to apples. For the most part, we humans have agency, meaning that there isn't some organism larger than us scooping us up and forcing us to live in an enclosed tank from which there is no escape.
U.S. Senator John Stennis investigated the Head Start program.
We found that one salaried employee actually was in Washington taking part in civil rights marches while drawing a salary in Mississippi.
Stennis wielded national power on the Senate committee that controlled funding for the war on poverty. He summoned Shriver to testify.
The whole truth, so help you God. I do.
Stennis had proof that CDGM had used funds for teachers to pay civil rights workers. He wanted Shriver to shut the program down.
Well, I bet I was disappointed, sir. You didn't move. That's called you a man of action. You're a man of action.
Senator Stennis attacked this program immediately because he did not want black folk controlling significant amounts of money. He didn't want black children and parents thinking differently. I mean, he saw the revolution that it was.
And I think it's significant that of all the charges we've heard about this program, nobody has yet contested the quality of the program, the content, its results, or the meaning of this program to the parents and the children of the poor people who are involved.
And psychologist John Friedman presented the argument that it's not necessarily overpopulation that was the problem with Universe 25. Instead, it was the increased level of social interaction that drove the mice mad. Not to mention the fact that the mice born into Universe 25 didn't form the kinds of social bonds they normally would.
The big bummer is that even when the population began to decrease, the mice weren't able to return to normal activities like mating. They simply died off.
Do you sleep with a man?
Now, that's none of your business.
It's none of your business either.
You're wrong, Mrs. Price. It is our business. This man may be bringing things into your home which you may not be deducting. Now, you know I have to deduct you on those things.
What things? What things, damn it?
The President of the United States is saying to him, you know, look, we can't crush the whole war on poverty or Head Start nationwide because of this one program. You got to do something with it. Senator Stennis is powerful. He's leaning on me. You have got to do something about this program in Mississippi. I don't care how good it is. Sergeant Shriver was caught in a terrible vice, a terrible position. He didn't want to cut off something that represented the best of what he could imagine Head Start would be.
You have a man come over for dinner, he brings you a bottle of wine. I have a man come over for dinner, he brings me a damn six-pack. Oh, there are two left, Miss Kayback. Would you like a beer?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Price.
I'm sorry, too. I figured it out. It comes to about $1.35. If he brings my kid some soda, that's about 80 cents. Now, with quick figuring, that comes to about $2.15, Miss Kayback. That's plus tax.
You mean to tell me that's all he gives you, $2.15?
How much do you get?
What became of the beautiful ones? Calhoun removed a group of them and put them in an enclosure with fewer mice and more space, plus a lifetime of clean water and food. The expectation was that they would revert to normal behaviors.
But the effects of societal collapse were irreversible, something called the behavioral sink, the point of no return. And Calhoun saw this with the beautiful ones, who continued to groom their days away, forever oblivious to one another.
So there you go. The war on poverty. And the war on poverty was not a war. Now, the problem with the war on poverty was that Johnson appointed a man. Now, I don't want to give any impression that I endorse the actions that Sarge Shriver would have taken. However, they would have been a whole heck of a lot better than what ended up happening. Sarge Shriver went in, and in his mindset, you needed to do two key things to empower blacks. And his goal, and it wasn't just blacks, it was the Appalachian whites was a big thing back then. But the blacks were a big focus. And what you needed to do is you needed to, on one hand, you needed to make sure that they had access to education, quality education, that they could be empowered through education. And the other thing was legal aid. They needed to be able to use the power of law to stop government from just running roughshod over them. And the Democrats who all voted for this, and many Republicans as well, and of course all Republicans voted for the Civil Rights Legislation Act, which I'm not going to get into the whole war on poverty and how many ways that was really bad for a lot of reasons. But they decided that this guy was actually, he wasn't keeping blacks in their place. He was actually coming up with programs that might actually lift them out. You listen to the very beginning of this segment, Martin Luther King Jr., he described, I believe, the type of funding that he wanted. And again, I'm not saying that I'm not supportive of government funding anything, but he described the type of funding that government did to help the white poor. And what they did is they bought them stuff that they could use to make livelihoods with. They got them low interest loans so they could start business. Their type of funding for the white poor was very different than the type of funding that would emerge for the black poor. What it ended up being was the very thing that Shriver didn't want it to be. It ended up being Mouse Utopia. It ended up being handouts.
Well, and Mouse Utopia is what you had recorded in bits and pieces in there.
Right.
Along with
the movie.
The clips from that movie.
Oh, and what was the name of that movie? Oh, Charlotte or something.
Which was essentially the government running people's lives.
The scene that you'll see is there's a song actually that they're playing called Welfare Man. I forget how it goes. And they're all getting ready to hide their stuff from the welfare man. And in this case, it's a welfare lady. And what the welfare man did was he would run around and he or she was looking. What you think about this, what they were actually looking for, they wanted to make sure you weren't working. There's like disincentive to work because your choice was either I work, in which case I know I'm not going to make enough money to survive. I'm not going to be able to take care of my kids, my family, or I don't work and I can actually take care of my kids can get health care. There's incredible disincentive to work, but on top of that, you couldn't be married. You couldn't have a man in your life. If you have a man in your life, this is the purposeful, intentional deconstruction of the family unit in the black ghettos.
And that's what we have now. And it's not just with black ghettos, it's with poor people in general.
So what we have now
we have incentives not to go to work. The more children you have, the more public assistance helps you. The fact that you're not married is a plus.
Right.
If you leave your job, they'll not just buy you a cell phone, they'll actually pay for your car repairs.
And what we saw at the very beginning, remember when you were talking about the dude at the very end of the first segment, how he talked, how unintelligent he spoke. And this is not a racial thing. It's not a quote unquote cultural thing. It is a socially engineered thing. It was done on purpose.
It's class warfare.
They turned Black America, and I don't mean all of Black America, I mean a significant segment of Black America has been turned, and I would argue significant segments of other poor communities, including white America. It's not exclusive, but we're talking about Black America today. Right. They turned Black America into the beautiful ones. They have become, well, there's the beautiful ones, and then there's the gangbangers, the guys just going nuts fighting. There's sexual licentiousness, and the scary thing is, and you don't know if there's a direct. I mean, mice are mice and humans are humans. So are humans capable of unlearning what mice could not unlearn? That remains to be seen. But one thing is sure. We have a significant segment in society that has been socially engineered by this government by the Democratic Party with the Republican Party wholeheartedly, secretly supporting them to engineer a whole group of people so that they couldn't compete with the powers that be. That's what we have in America today.
But they are competing.
They're not competing nearly as well as they would if they weren't had their, somebody stepping on their neck like they have been for the past. Well,
but is it just the blacks that have their necks stepped on, or is it the middle class as well?
Yeah, no, but
because the middle class is the greatest threat to the elites.
It is now. It wasn't then. They still needed the middle class. See, what has shifted from the 1960s to 2015? They don't need as many highly skilled people as they once needed. They just don't need as big a middle class as they used to need.
And populations are a liability.
Right.
And the more automation you have, the more the populations become a liability, the more you have to go after the middle class as well. So give them lots of free goodies. Let them become sexually deviant.
Let them cannibalize them. Let them kill themselves off.
So this is class warfare, plain and simple.
So you want to disarm them, so if they do get crazy...
Would you agree it's class warfare? It's the ruling elites?
I don't know if I call it class warfare. I would call it power warfare. I would call it the power versus the unpowered, the non-powered. And I mean, class to me is...
rich, middle class, and poor.
It's not really that, though, because there are people who are wealthy who are still part of the targeted class. It's not just about how much money you have. It's whether you are part of a small group of families that have been deemed to be the chosen ones. And that means the nouveau riche, okay, the basketball players that are making millions of dollars, football players making millions of dollars, the tech entrepreneurs that are making millions of dollars. Do you really think that those folks aren't also targets still? If they're not part of the right class of family. And
so
when
I say there's a ruling class,
there are ruling families,
but it's a crypto ruling class.
And
they're not out in the open like the King of England and saying, "I am your king."
I would support to you that it's a ruling network of families that aren't even aware that they're a ruling network of families. Some might be, but by and large, most people, they just know, like, oh man, oh, you're from the Johnston Boudoir family. Oh, well, that's not
this
quite.
Is crossing into kind of the territory of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Crazy?
No.
Not on my part, on their part. I'm not the crazy one, man.
This is a conspiracy.
It's not a conspiracy. It's what happens.
Well, who engineered
when power consolidates?
Yeah, but who engineered the Mouse Utopia, and how did it translate? And then how do we see the direct parallels to the inner cities?
I think that there's push, and then there's push me, pull me. There is maybe a small group of people that understands exactly what it is that they're doing, and they're not necessarily the planners, although some of them may be planners, but they understand what it is that they want to achieve. What they actually want to achieve is something very pragmatic. They want to consolidate and preserve and extend their power. This is what they want. And then directly below them, there's a network of folks that they're the true ideologues. And so the people who have the ideologies and the worldviews that when the folks that, and again, this isn't these folks meeting in Bilderberg, the Bilderberg group. I'm not talking about that. It's like when you listen to somebody talk about their worldview and say you're pro-liberty, and they have a worldview which you just know that's not liberty. And you're not going to endorse that person. You're not going to support that person. You're not going to finance that person. But when you see somebody coming along that has an ideology, a worldview, a plan, and you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is totally cool. This will totally, without, this gets rid of the mess. No muss, no fuss. I don't have to worry about riots. I can I can still get the goodwill of the people because it looks like, we're doing good things for poor people. It's like a natural fit. It's not a conspiracy so much as it's good, quote unquote, and I use this term very, very loosely, good ideas find each other. That's what I think has happened here.
Sounds like a new mercantile system to me.
Well, think about Sarge Shriver. Sarge Shriver was a progressive. He was a true, and he was a progressive in the latter 20th century term of progressive. He had made the switch from, and maybe he was never in the, I don't know where he was at early in his career, but he was not in the scientific racist thing. He made the switch, but he made the switch to true egalitarianism. And what he wanted was actual true egalitarianism. He really didn't want to keep the blacks in their place. That wasn't his desire. He really wanted this egalitarian society, and he understood by his worldview that you needed government to do it. And so he stepped in. This is the guy that started the Peace Corps. He did wonderful things before, well, it's wonderful. I don't know how wonderful Peace Corps is. Maybe it's terrible, but I haven't looked deeply into it. He had a vision, which early on, the powers that be that wanted to consolidate power saw in this a way to, it empowered government, it appeased the blacks, it kept calm things down, but he went too far. Johnson, I don't think, expected him to go as far as he went. So when his worldview began to clash with what they really wanted, which was power, consolidation of power, preservation, extension of power, he had to go. And he did. He was let go. He was no longer the poverty czar. They moved on. All of the things that he designed, all of the early leaders that had come in with this, and Head Start early on was making some real headway. They were building schools for black communities. They were empowering. And what the Head Start programs early on, they were designed in such a way to hand the power over to the blacks. Or whatever community, whether it's Appalachian whites, blacks, to hand the power and the resources over to them. It's like the government came in and said, okay, we're going to do the initial layout here, but now we're going to give the resources to you. You guys know best what's on the ground, how to design and build it. And the government said, whoa, hold on. They might actually start to develop competition. They might actually start building businesses. They might actually have minds that will emerge, that will challenge our minds. They might have visions that challenge our visions. They might have politicians that challenge our politicians. Dude, this has got to go. Let's just redesign this welfare system in a way that you need to make sure that you're not married, make sure that you're not getting a job. So we want the puppy mills, and we want welfare families, generations of welfare families. We want to put them in these tight communities. It was very important when we were listening to this pre-recorded thing. It was like, what the heck does this have to do with anything when we're talking about the structure of the Mouse Utopia? And you remember how it described the structure of Mouse Utopia? You could very just as easily be describing any projects in the ghettos today. That is how they were built. Pruitt Eagle. Look up Pruitt Eagle. What happened there? Pruitt Eagle is like a microcosm. And it failed. It totally disintegrated, and they ended up leveling it. And it was this inhuman pushing in together of humanity in a forced way. It was a human warehouse, and there's a
very
vast
way of
portion of Black Americans that are still living in these little, I don't know what universes we're up to now. Universe 570, because his was universe 25. So I don't know where we're at. So what we have done here in this show, hopefully, is shown you that racism is very real in America, and it's being exploited not only by the racist but by the opportunists. And
institutions as well.
It's like, why all of a sudden are they creating white racism in America and allowing white racism to exist? The reason is quite simple. They no longer need the powerful middle class that they once needed to do their higher end work. They don't need as many high end managers as they used to need. They don't need as many designers as they used to need. They can get by with a lot less high quality resources. And a middle class, a strong middle class, has a sense of ownership. They're gun owners, they're business owners, They're landowners, they're homeowners. They're not going to easily surrender when the government says, yeah, we're going to take this from you. So now all that, and because of their social engineering, because of their little mouse utopias, an inordinate number of people are white that are middle class. If they hadn't done what they had done, you'd probably have a lot more black people living in America today. I don't know how many.
Middle class.
No, period.
Yeah, but
you would have
also in the middle class. They would not be
absolutely.
in the ghettos.
No, there would be no ghettos.
Right.
There would be suburbs, and there would be and what you would end up with is you would have some integration and you would have some black communities, just like you have now. You have Italian communities, whatever the case might be.
Why the move towards the government trying to control everything? What has changed?
What has changed is that they don't need as many high-quality resources as they once needed. That's what's changed. So now the middle class is now expendable.
But back in the 40s and 50s and 60s,
still needed a lot of high-quality managers, designers, engineers.
No, I get that. But back then, they were still targeting blacks. They were still.
No, they didn't need the blacks. They didn't want the blacks.
They didn't want the blacks.
They were happy with the whites being
with the whites.
Right, because the white, and plus the whites at that time, the whites were pretty controllable. We had I'm a Christian, so I don't say this lightly. We had a mergent, you couldn't be a Christian and have any standing in America in the 40s and 50s. Even Johnson's speech, the War on Poverty speech, his presidential address was it 1963. He ends it by saying, "God will bless us. God approves of what we're doing." That's how he ends it. So even in the 60s, still there was this. Religion was used to control whites. Patriotism was used to control whites. They had them firmly under control. Blacks are a little bit more. I mean, they loved America. They loved, most of them were Christian, but they had a look. I'm talking about the successful.
Well, their perspective
they were a lot more independent minded
because they were the class on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And when you're on the outside looking in, you see
things.
You see things that are like, ew. Hey, how do you not see that? As an immigrant, I constantly look from the outside into American culture, even in my neighborhood, and I see it's like, really, this is how you guys behave. This is what you actually believe.
Yeah, and me,
how? How do you believe that?
Yeah, obviously, I grew up, and so I grew up with the veneer. I was absolutely in the veneer, and it took me. Oh, I don't know. I guess it really started in earnest maybe 8 years ago, where all of a sudden I start to see, things just don't quite add up
anymore.
And it took me. I mean, I'm still discovering things, but I would say it took me a good 6 years from 8 years ago to really fully emerge from my illusion. And you and I, we met 3 years ago.
It's been that long.
It's been that long, yeah. And we met 3 years ago, and we were both kind of in the same place, and we've kind of went through this journey. In a lot of ways, we went through it together, where we started off and we're both saying, "Oh, I'm not really a conservative, definitely not a progressive." We called ourselves classic liberal. Yeah, that's what we both were.
Libertarian,
and then we
kind of.
And then we started stripping away the veneer, the institutions that were creating. For me, I'm going to say for myself, the institutions that were creating a false sense of identity. And my identity was I'm American, love the flag, I'm a Christian American. My identity in Christ is still pretty. Yeah, it is actually central. That hasn't changed. But my Christian identity, in large part, was tied to my American identity. They were almost one.
For me, there's an anxiety lately in me, and I think the anxiety that I feel, a lot of other people feel as well. And I get the Black Lives Matter people. I get their anxiety. But it's misplaced. And for me, a lot of people's anxiety in this country is totally misplaced. Grab a group, any group, and look at who they really are, and look at the middle class and its anxiety. The anxiety is coming from something real, but people can't put their finger on it. The Black Lives Matter folks, they have a legitimate.
Yeah, they're tapping into a real injustice that's occurred.
Yeah, they have a legitimate beef. But what they don't see is that their eyes have been taken off the target of who and what has caused this, and has been redirected. Their energy has been redirected to a putz who has little to do with it. The cops had nothing to do with them being thrown in the ghettos. White folks had nothing to do with them being thrown in the ghettos, or at least the white middle class didn't. They have a legitimate.
Well, they didn't have anything directly to do with it, but they certainly exercise a lot of complacency in that happening.
Who's they? The middle class.
The white middle class.
Oh, absolutely.
The cops as well, and how the cops began to look at the black community, which began they started to treat them like subhumans, because most blacks are not acting like subhuman, but enough of them were that cops were starting to treat them, and so you had that vicious cycle going on. You treat me like a subhuman, I treat you like a subhuman, which makes you treat me even worse, which makes me treat you. That's kind of spiraling out of control. So I am sure that if you were in the black community, that when you see a cop, your immediate thought is, "Oh crap."
Well, when I see a cop, I have two different feelings.
I hope I don't get my butt kicked today.
I have two different feelings because I work closely with law enforcement, and I have good friends who are in law enforcement. And there's the part of me that says, "Oh, law enforcement, he's my buddy. I work with these guys." And then when you engage law enforcement and they don't know you from Adam, there's the other side of it, which is like, "Oh, they're treating me like a perp. Oh, this is my buddy. This is the opposite of my buddy. This is someone who I need to watch my back." So I have mixed feelings about police officers, and I know cops that have mixed feelings about police officers, because police officers, this may be a surprise to everyone, are a representation of society in general.
Yeah, and
where you have good people and
police
bad people.
Police officers also are vulnerable to conditioning, which maybe we'll do for another show. We'll look at Milgram's. We'll look at Milgram's experiments. And
Pilgrims. Why Pilgrims?
Milgram's experiments.
Oh, Milgram's.
And we'll look at some prison experiments that colleges did, and how you start to take on a role. In that role, you start to treat people like not people. So anyway, we're gonna have to wrap this up. Any last words as we sum it all? When we went through the real racism and how it's changed. We looked at how they're using gun control to make sure that the black community does not get armed. And I mean, by the black community, I don't mean the criminals. We mean the
good and decent folk trying to get by.
The folks that in a lot of ways, these folks are following the nap, even if they don't know what the nap is. It's kind of inbred in us, I think. I would say by God. Somebody would say by creation itself. Whatever the case, we have this inbred notion in us to leave people alone and to want to be left alone, to live and let live.
But you can't do that when you're in a tower.
You can't do that, right?
When you're in the Mouse
you got
tower.
no space, and it's like life or death out there. So then, it's life or death out there. Meanwhile, you got plenty of food to eat. You have the poor people in America. They are not. The poor. Really, the lower middle class in most nations would love to be the poor in America.
When I was growing up as an immigrant in the United States, we lived in some pretty poor neighborhoods and some pretty poor inner city neighborhoods. And what is very distinct about the interaction between people in those communities versus the suburbs where I live now was that in those communities, the smallest little thing was a big deal, and always a point of contention. Always there was an argument to start, a family feud to begin with the smallest thing. You stepped on my Pumas, man, my suede Pumas. What is your problem?
Eventually it becomes, I will shoot you.
Right.
You
dinged my car.
I will cut you. Yeah, right. Whatever it is. Yeah.
The smallest thing. You're always walking on eggshells for the smallest thing. In the suburbs, we ignore everybody. And this is the bottom line to the Mouse
Utopia.
And this is where we are now.
Right. So we're going to wrap it up here. And I hope that you guys enjoy it. Next week, we will not. We will not be on next week
because of the holidays, or the next week because of the holidays. So we will come back in the first Thursday in January. And I have no idea what the show will be about, but it's not going to be as intense as this one. Because above all else, we want to laugh. That's right. We want to laugh at our dystopian reality around us. Because what else can you do? So this is Paul, and I'll say goodbye for Dimitri as well. And we'll see you in January.
Stay awake with Dimitri and Paul.
You're either with us or you're with the enemy. That's clear. I will continue to make that clear.
Wake up! What difference at this point does it make? It's one of those days when you don't want to wake up.
Basically, taking over and the government running all of your companies.
We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
Wake up! Wake up!
We're scared. We're scared of an Obama presidency.
I have to tell you, he is a decent person and a person that you do not have to be scared as President of the United States.
I have 2 words for you. Predator's lungs. You will never see it coming.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Either you're with us, either you love freedom and with nations which embrace freedom, or you're with the enemy.
Wake up! Wake up!
You also ask the school board to make a part of every day some kind of anti-violence, anti-gun message. Every day, every school, at every level. And we need to do this every day of the week and just brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
And when they say, I want my lawyer, you tell them, shut up.
Your time is
Get a lawyer. You're an enemy combatant.
We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities.
Stay awake with Dimitri and Paul. What's your state of wake?